Sanity has prevailed just a tiny bit in Australia's slightly delusional energy policy world. The Queensland and Federal Governments this week announcing that they will expand Australia's gas production. The Queensland Government is opening up 9 new fields in the Cooper, Irramanga and Bowen Surat basins. I hope I said all that right. And the Feds have approved a 40-year extension of Woodside's Northwest Shelf project. Natural gas accounts for more than a quarter of Australia's total energy consumption, and this decision follows blackout warnings in New South Wales and Queensland from the Australian Energy Market Operator due to high electricity demand and hot temperatures likely during summer. The Queensland Government says we need regulations that support new development instead of holding it back. And past unscientific decisions made by the southern states has left Queensland carrying the load for the East Coast gas market, leading to the need for more exploration. Environmentalists, meanwhile, say that they're devastated by the announcement. Okay, they say that gas will be destined for export, not domestic use. Well, gas is Queensland's second largest export. I have joining us on the show today Graham Young from the Australian Institute of Progress, who's been looking at all of this. Graham, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Damien.
The narrative here, probably not so appealing to our New South Wales and Victorian and South Australian and West Australian viewers, that Queensland is saving the day. You were noticing my bookshelf, and I do have the history of the state of origin. So I've been reading this. No. This week I've been. The history's much more
too tender.
The history's much more pleasant than the present. I've got to say. But anyway, it was a great game. All right, Graham Young, good to have you. So this is good in a way, because it's going to mean lower electricity prices first of all, right?
It'll have a small impact on electricity prices, actually. I think 90% of it is for export, and that has no effect on our domestic electricity prices. 10% of it will be for domestic use. But there's a cost to transporting gas. So Queensland's actually pretty well set up with our coal-fired power stations, and the current government has indicated they're going to keep them running as long as they need to.
So at least Queensland will have electricity.
Yeah, so the role that gas plays in the electricity system is basically to even out demand when there's fluctuations in renewables and when renewables aren't available at all. So Queensland's in the fortunate position of having a lot of coal and not as much renewables at the moment. So we can work on getting storage in place that's not gas. There is some gas demand here, but the gas demand's much higher in Sydney, in New South Wales and Victoria. In fact, the New South Wales government is racing ahead with renewables. The thing with gas is it costs so much when it comes out of the ground, but it's not free to transport. So probably something like $3 by the time you get it down to Victoria, if the pipeline capacity is there to do that in the amounts that they need.
So we're not talking about generating. So we're sending the gas down to Victoria. We're not generating electricity in Queensland and sending that to the grid down.
Well, again, there's a constraint there. You've got a gigawatt basically goes over the border at Queensland, and there's plans to extend that, but still, again, you've got the transport problem. It comes into northern New South Wales, but the further away it gets, the more transmissions involved, the more expensive it is. It wouldn't be going down to Victoria. But it could displace demand in New South Wales, which would allow New South Wales to send demand down.
So 10% of this will be for domestic use. That's going to be a lot of that exported out of Queensland down to New South Wales and Victoria, which we need. So that's staying in Australia.
Well, some of the New South Wales. I doubt whether any of them will get to Victoria.
Okay. All right. So at least we're contributing something from Queensland, I guess, across the East Coast and using it for domestic purposes. And as you say, it's essential. We have to have something that's going to provide baseload power at times when wind and solar are not able to carry the load, and we need that baseload power to be consistent and reliable. You can't have these massive fluctuations, right? So it's got to be gas, or it's got to be nuclear, or it's got to be coal. And as much as the environmentalists want to cry.
So gas has a niche because you can actually turn it on really quickly. Nuclear and coal, they can deal with fluctuations, but you can't just switch a coal-fired power station on like that. You certainly can't switch a nuclear power station on like that because
Not when you don't have any.
not when you don't have any, no. But
Hello.
even if you did, that's not the way they work.
Yeah.
However, with gas, the open cycle gas, it's like a jet aircraft engine, and you can turn them on really quickly. So that's the function that the gas generally performs. So they have closed cycle, which are cheaper to run, and then the open cycle, which are very wasteful, but which you can bring on really quickly to deal with these fluctuations.
Right.
And there's people out there who have gas plants who only run them a couple of times a year. So it's an insurance policy that's being taken out in those cases. But I think, Damien...
So they've got to charge a lot when they turn them on to cover the whole year of keeping and maintaining them, I guess. And
yeah, well, it's again, you've got to pay them for the capital cost effectively, even though they don't run very often, but you've got to pay them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they won't be there and you won't have the stability. But in talking about gas and power, we're ignoring a huge part of the market for gas. Most of it isn't used for generating power. Most of it is used, pardon me, for things like fertiliser, plastics, pharmaceuticals. You can't make bricks with electricity. You do it with gas. Glass is made with gas. And the lack of gas, for example, has already had an impact on Brisbane. So Incitec Pivot, large multinational Australian-listed company, had an operation at Gibson Island, just down before you get to the Port of Brisbane, near the Gateway Bridge.
What do they make?
They don't make anything anymore because they couldn't get gas at the right price. But they used to make urea, they used to make ammonia. There was supposed to be a green hydrogen hub hung off the side of it.
So
they closed it down.
Before we to run past that one, because that's huge, right? The
fertilizer
urea is a big deal because that's
feeding 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
You can't do it without natural gas.
We need that stuff.
We
feed
need
Australia.
that stuff to feed people.
Yeah.
Explosives, so we're producing explosives. I don't think they were producing plastics, but natural gas is used for plastics. So you can't have an iPhone, for example. You can't have the studio without natural gas.
No. We're all relying on this stuff.
So electricity is, in some respects, the least of your problem. And what we're doing now, since the Incitec Pivot operation was closed down, we're actually importing that stuff from the Middle East. 70% of our urea, I think it is, comes from UAE and places like that.
Which becomes a sovereign risk, right? Because we're reliant upon the Middle East for our food supply.
That, plus it has zero. If you're a greenie and you're worried about the effect on the environment, all you've done is exported our emissions to somewhere else and then made it worse because there's a ship has to bring it in and there's a whole logistics line which is, again, emitting CO2. So there's many layers on the gas story. And by concentrating on electricity, we're really selling the severity of the problem if we don't have enough gas. We're really selling it down. In a sense, if you didn't have gas, it'd be a question of how many people do you want to kill. If you don't have gas, you don't have fertilisers, you can't feed 8 billion people on the planet. Maybe 6 billion of those people would starve to death.
When I ran for federal parliament in 2022 for the Liberal Democrats, I ran in the seat of Ryan in Brisbane, which is the only Green House of Representatives seat in Australia now, held by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Watson-Brown. And we had a forum at a conference where I lost my cool a little bit. And I actually asked her, I said, how many people do you want to kill, Elizabeth? And she thought that was highly offensive. And I got told I was being mean to women for asking that question. But anyway, it's a serious question that people don't ask themselves when they virtue signal about all this environmental stuff. They don't look at economics and reality and say, hang on a minute, okay, it might be that we don't have any fertiliser and we can't farm in Australia. What's it doing to the export market in India that we send them? Well, we're actually killing people, right? Or Africa or whatever, where people need to eat. And so a lot of this gas is going to be exported. I'm hearing a lot of stuff online these days among the younger under 40s YouTube crowd, like friendly Geordies and punters politics, and
he's got under your skin
on the lefty side.
Geordies.
Friendly Geordies is fine. It's just a Labor. He's just the Labor Party line. That's his job, is to amplify Labor's line. I don't know who's paid him to do it. We're not getting paid, by the way, just to be totally transparent. But I would just ask the question. They keep saying, and this is a valid question, where are the bloody royalties? Why is Australia not getting royalties, more royalties?
Queensland got, I think, $1.5 billion worth of royalties out of it last year. I mean,
are we charging enough?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
I mean, you've got to get this stuff out of the ground. If you charge too much, it'll stay in the ground.
Well, I've got a mate in mining.
Royalty is taxation.
Yeah.
Right? So the more you tax something, the less of it there is.
I've got a mate in mining who says that, well, mate, we can't. No one wants to build any mines in Australia because it's too expensive already. So he's working on a mine in Mongolia at the moment. It's like we've got to be competitive, right? We can't just tax endlessly. But I do wish we kept a little bit more of our sovereign wealth, or extracted a little bit more of our.
I think $1.5 billion is pretty good. We got a lot out of coal royalties. So a lot of this chatter that you're seeing is driven by the Australia Institute. So if you want to add another villain to your list with Friendly Geordies...
Well, Friendly Geordies claims he has nothing to do with the Australia Institute, but
no,
I beg to differ, because I've seen him transcribe virtually word for word, not word for word, but he's roughly used Greg Jericho's stuff, writing, right, in The Guardian, which is this left nexus, right? You've got this Greg Jericho's writing stuff out of the Australia Institute. He's the Australia Institute. Friendly Geordies is taking stuff off The Guardian, and Greg Jericho's writing. So there's some connection.
The Australia Institute's what I call a meme factory. So their purpose, it was quite honourable when Clive Hamilton first started off. It was a reputable left-wing organisation. Came to conclusions I didn't agree with, but it got there by respectable means. Now, what it does is it cherry picks things, makes stuff up, puts it into a glossy report, which is really well produced, and it gets uncritically reproduced in the media, and then it gets pushed out social media by Friendly Geordies, but, whoever in pyjamas just down the road here in Nunda.
Punters Politics or me.
Whatever. And a lot of what they do is made up. So they'll say, these companies don't pay tax. And they'll pick the year when resources were so cheap that no one was making any money out of them. And they'll ignore the years after that when they're paying billions of dollars in tax. Right. They ignore the fact that they're paying royalties all through that period when the prices are too low. The other thing they do is that the deal that the federal government, so most of the minerals is done, the deals are done by the states. So they'll ignore that. They'll say, well, the federal government doesn't get any money out of it. Oh, yeah, but Queensland does and Western Australia does. There is one lot of royalties that the federal government gets, and that's when it's outside the states in our economic zone. And the deal that they did there, which was similar to the deal that Kevin Rudd was pushing for all mining, means that the miners get their depreciation more or less up front, which means they get a tax holiday effectively, or they don't pay tax for a long period of time. So that's the other thing they leverage off. It's completely manufactured. We make lots of money out of these resources. The other thing they do is they look at Norway, and they say, well, Norway gets, I think it might be 70% or something like that of the revenues, and they've got this big sovereign wealth fund which pays for people to go and study overseas, etc.
They got that right. They got that right. We should be we give our royalties to our governments to waste and spend. We don't put them in a sovereign wealth fund. But
what they ignore is that the Norwegian government owns a lot of those. They invest the risk capital in there. So it's not our state governments, our federal government doesn't put any risk capital in at all.
Okay.
It's done by private capitalists.
Right.
Whereas in Norway, a lot of the oil and gas, they actually own the companies that are exploiting it. So it's not so much they're getting taxes.
Through the sovereign wealth fund.
Well, I'm not sure. I think they actually put it into the sovereign wealth fund after they'd started doing this.
Okay.
And so they're getting effectively dividends as well as royalties, and that's what grosses up to that figure. So if the federal government and the state governments want to set up their own oil companies and so on and exploit it and export it and make $1 out of it, good luck to them. But they shouldn't expect people like you and me to buy shares in companies and then miss out on decent dividends because they see a lot of money there and think, well, we can grab that and we can spend it over here to bribe people not to notice that we're destroying the economy and it's costing them. But if we give them $300 off their electricity, well, they might actually re-elect us.
We didn't.
Who knows?
Did we get the $300? I don't think we did we? No. All right. Thanks, Graham. We'll come back in just a moment. Graham Young joining me from the Australian Institute of Progress, and we'll be talking to Graham in a moment about another very important topic. The other side doesn't get more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money to bring you news from a centre-right perspective like the ABC does to bring you news from a left-wing perspective. In fact, we don't get a red cent from the government. We need voluntary donors and supporters like you to keep going and growing. And we hate asking for charity, so we've done a deal with what we think is the world's best VPN, virtual private network service. It'll keep you and your family truly safe without slowing down your internet speeds, and you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. And you can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and get more info. That's piavpn.com/otherside. That was a segment from a recent episode of our fortnightly news commentary show, The Other Side, with me, Damien Curry. If you liked it, support us. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube right now so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free. Just click that subscribe button and the little bell. And check out our Other Side Unplugged show too, and join our mission to actually do something and change Aussie media for the better at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out now.